I'm going to address the during part of our round of negotiations, and we had table meetings. We eventually we had a few to start with, and then we eventually were able to add a few more. So we had 15 meetings in the fall. We started on 13 September, and our last table meeting was on 7 December. And we spent about 75 hours altogether because some of them were full days, some of them were 1 hour. They weren't. So it adds up to about 75 hours. Still plenty of time, right, to reach an agreement. So on 13 September, since they had rejected our proposal to listen to our proposals to get ahead of the game, we decided that, okay, then we'll do it on the 13th of September. So for the first time in our history, we actually tabled a whole package of our proposals, a complete package, including the financials, on 13 September, because we felt we didn't have any time to waste, given that we were starting so late. The Board of Governors tables the package as well, which surprised us, but only of non-monetary. And as you can imagine, the package was much slimmer than ours, right? They didn't do their homework as they were supposed to do with our rollover agreement. We saw proposals that have been coming across the table since I've been here 20 years. And so the same proposals that they dusted off and put back on the table, and mostly like editorial things and clawbacks as we expect. However, we did reach an agreement on protocols, and we set the agenda for the next meeting. And the next meeting was a full day on the 15th of September. And the lead negotiator on the other side said, let's keep that light and positive so that we can, put this complaint behind us and start, on a different foot. And since our mandate was about decolonizing, indigenizing, and applying an EDIA lens, we thought, great, we can start with we have an article on equity and fairness. And so we said that would be the first thing that we can tackle. And so on the 15th, though, they came back with, you won't believe this, but discipline, dismissal, grievance, and arbitration. Those were their light, positive proposals that they wanted to present on the 15th. So we got immediately aware that there was no such thing as putting the complaint behind or the tactics behind, the hard bargaining tactics, etc., that we were going to start right there with those hard bargaining tactics. So in contrast, the FA presents, we wanted a land acknowledgement to be included in our collective agreement. We thought that's something that's not controversial, everybody can agree to. We also, as you know, our collective agreement uses feminine pronouns, which was pretty radical in 1988, but it's now time to open that up and be more inclusive. So we had wanted to include a preamble to our collective agreement that would recognize this avant-garde language that we had in 1988, now we've had since 1988, in explaining why it's time now to change it to gender neutral language. Again, we thought this was something that would be non-controversial and everybody would feel good that day and we'd have something accomplished. So then with Article 3 is our article on equity and fairness. And because our LOUs on indigenizing, decolonizing, and EDIA had provided us with fabulous reports, we had fabulous recommendations. Now those LOUs were made up of committees, right? That had members from the board and members from the admin and members from the FA who worked collaboratively in order to arrive at these recommendations. Now, the idea was not that they proposed, that we just take whatever they have and for granted, and there were no negotiations. It's not another way of negotiating away from the table, but it was simply recommendations of things to look at and look for, and it was substantiated by some backup research. So we thought, this is easy, like we can just include some of those in our equity and fairness. Because one of our LOUs mentioned that Article 7 for us is our joint committee to administer the collective agreement. So we said they wanted kind of have an EDIA standing committee part of that would help us navigate the EDIA and indigenizing components of our collective agreement. So again, simple things. Article 8 is on space that we have for the association. We don't have a club. We have no faculty club. We have like an old classroom that was turned into a space for us, and which has a little bit of a kitchenette and so forth. So there's no club, and half of the room is only accessible or in our rights to use, and the other half is not. Well, one half has the technology. So when we hold meetings, for example, you'd have to be in that half, but then you don't have the kitchen. And sometimes they can actually close with, those sliding things, that you can still hear everybody. And they can have a group beside us. So this is not a good idea, and certainly not a good idea in diversifying our faculty. We need a space where there is a sense of community. And so we put some of those recommendations in our proposals around the space for the FA. We also, thinking that would not be controversial, in 33 is our resignation. Right now, we've had several resignations over the last 10 years, many of whom are from diverse backgrounds and marginalized groups. And while we know sometimes, because they expressed their concerns with how they were treated at the Mount, we thought that one thing we could do better is to have an exit survey. And we, again, thought this would be a simple thing to agree to. And finally, in Article 35 was our academic staffing. We've been doing some cluster hirings. So we had a Black cluster hire, and then we had an Indigenous cluster hire. And before that, we used to have a diverse hire program. And so we thought, again, like, we've been doing this, so let's put it in our collective agreement. Well, obviously that we got nowhere that day. So we continue until 7 December. Still on the table is dismissal, discipline dismissal and grievance. We finally agreed on arbitration a little earlier. So they, in fact, 12 out of our 15 meetings, they brought back discipline, dismissal, and grievance. Now, of course, their proposals were not things that they were asking for more time, extending timelines, and they're already lengthy enough. As you know, for grievances, sometimes the process is so long that the issue becomes moot because the timelines have been passed. And they're often concerning situations that are time sensitive. So extending them further was out of the question, but they kept bringing this back. They continued their hard bargaining tactics. So they would put like ridiculous proposals on the table that they knew we would never accept. And so just surface bargaining as well. We spent so much time reading our proposals. Like we each had our packages. There's no reason for us to read. I think we can all read at the university, and we could have actually spent this time at the table negotiating rather than listening to each other read. But they didn't agree with that. They said that they just wanted to walk through the proposals. And so we spent most of the time doing that instead of actually negotiating. So clearly we didn't get very far. After 75 hours, we still had an enormous amount of work to do that was never accomplished. The few things that were countered was around the discipline and dismissal and arbitration and grievance, and which were not priorities for our members. So, of course, knowing how the process works in this province, that you cannot be in strike position before filing and going through the conciliation process, we had to, as you know, we all do this, we plan where's the limit, of that takes a long time to make the request. It takes a couple of weeks. Then there is a conciliator appointed who then goes back and forth and says, so we wanted to make sure the conciliation began before the holidays. And so we would be in strike position at the beginning of the winter term, despite the fact that we started so late. So we requested from them up until this point their financials, because as you know, we had provided them with our financials and non-financials, and they were not producing them. And not only were they not producing them, they couldn't tell us when. So we said, okay, we can't continue with this. So we filed for conciliation on the 11th of October. And we stated in that filing that we still had no financials and no time frame for them. At one point, said it could be in the spring. I'm thinking, oh, we're not going to wait for the spring. Clearly in the spring, we are no longer in a position to strike. And so they weren't even, how could I say, like, discreet about their strategy. It was quite obvious that they were trying to push us as far as possible in order to remove our strike power. But unfortunately, we were the only ones who could see that. On the 23rd of October, I got a call from the Chief Conciliation Officer, who also called the lead negotiator on the other side, and he denies conciliation services, which I didn't know they could, and I'm told they can't. You can file for conciliation the minute you're in bargaining, so according to the Trade Unit Act. But for some reason, this person thought they was in their authority to deny the services, but they asked the Board of Governors to table their financials and negotiate. When I had the chat with the Chief Conciliation Officer, I said, they're not going to do this, and he said, well, if they don't, then write back to me and I will appoint. So clearly they didn't provide any financials. They continued with their surface bargaining. And so on 6 November, I did, the team emailed the Chief Conciliation Officer and we asked them to appoint the conciliator as soon as possible. And we explained the whole thing. Like, again, the Labor Board is not, and they should be experienced and see these tactics, right, and understand them. I mean, we provided a very clear rationale for why we need to go into conciliation as soon as possible. And despite that, they're not seeing through those tactics. So on 8 November, though, true to his word, he appoints conciliator. In fact, he appointed 2 conciliators on our case. And he did say we had too many things on the table. And I said, well, we have too many things on the table because they don't want to negotiate anything. So it's not our fault, but it always looks like it's our fault that there's so many things still unresolved. It's because they're not even attempting to resolve. They're playing games. And again, like, our Trade Union Act and our Labor Board is not helpful. They're not helpful in this situation. So anyway, the conciliators reach out to us on the 9th of November, so they were quite quick, and they proposed dates starting in mid-December to early January. No surprise that they're not available. So the Board of Governors not available till the 9th of January. That was their earliest available date. Now, our last table meeting was on the 7th of December. That's more than a month in between. Granted, there are holidays in between, but still, there's a whole month. They were not available. We tried to get them to be available during December for more table meetings, and they said no, they were not available anymore. So we said, okay, we have to. We're going to have to live with that and go to conciliation in January. So we ran a strike vote from 1 December to 8 December, which was held in person and online to allow as many people as possible to vote. And as we've seen, well, probably seen in our press releases, 97% of our 99 eligible members voted yes. So it was a very, very strong strike vote. We held many sessions, explained what was going on, and our members were quite not just frustrated by how we were treated, but flabbergasted about how we were being treated. And note, these are brand new administrators. Our president had only been in for now a year. The 2 VPs had just arrived in the summer, and already we weren't able to have any kind of reasonable negotiations with them. So we started conciliation. To prepare for that, the conciliator said, but since we did have so many things on the table, that they were usually you bring your package, your binder at the first conciliation meeting. But given that we had so much stuff on the table, they said they invited us to submit earlier. So we did. We provided a comprehensive conciliation binder with all of our information that they need on the 16th of December. We met in conciliation in person on the 9th of January, and then they had also scheduled a second date on the 17th of January, which again, we would come, okay, they're just using this again to delay us into the spring. But for some reason, the conciliators kept believing that the Board of Governors was just doing the best they could. They weren't, like, we had too many proposals. I'm going, that's not our fault that we have too many proposals. They just didn't want to look at them before. And then finally, another date on the 25th of January. So between the 17th and the 25th, the conciliators started to see the game. And they said, okay, 25 is the cutoff. So if you can't reach an agreement, a tentative agreement on the 25th of January, we file that no board report on the 26th so that we don't lose our strike position, our power to strike. So of course, we didn't reach a tentative agreement on the 25th of January. And so the conciliators did file their no board report on the 26th of January, which now allows us to be in strike position. However, as you know, there's a 13th day in-person meeting while we're on the cooling off period, which we should call the heating up period, because we fervently did negotiations through the email and trying to resolve this before we go on strike. So there was nothing about, there's no cooling off during this period. But however, it was done through email, which is very onerous and very difficult. And the party on the other side is not very good with technology. So it had to go through email instead of shared documents. And they wanted to use track changes, which was an awful, awful recommendation. We'll never do that again. But anyway, on the 13th day in-person meeting on the 9th of February, the Board of Governors starts packaging. So we said, okay, because before that was just bundles, but no packaging. As you know, package bargaining means it's all or nothing. And so they started that on the 9th of February. We said, okay, we came to an agreement on this small package. However, we said they're going to continue doing that the package includes stuff we don't really want, but there's stuff that we want. Clearly, that's a good strategy, right? So we said, we'll play the same game. So the conciliators said, okay, we're going to continue through the weekend. So 9th February was a Friday. So we continued Saturday and Sunday, but it would be online and through email again, instead of in person, which is better because then you're not working on a little laptop. You have your big computers and screens to work with. So we did do that, but however, on Saturday we got clever and we said, well, we're going to package the whole thing instead of these little packages. And they were very upset by that. And contrary to their rules of packaging, they didn't want to agree to, they wanted to agree to parts of our package and not other parts. And we're going, that's not package bargaining. So in other words, they wanted us to play by the usual rules, but they wanted to break the rules all the time. So we were in strike position on the 10th, actually, because the no board report was filed on the 26th, but obviously we weren't going to strike on a Saturday. And we took advantage of this weekend, hoping they would come to their senses, knowing that Monday, on the 12th, we would go on strike, that our members were going to walk out. And we were hoping that there would be like a last minute kind of deal, that they'd wake up, but they didn't. They didn't, and so we walked out on the 12th. So my questions, again, for this part is, again, the box we have to work with is the Trade Union Act. Right now, it requires conciliation before we can go on strike or lockout. And what happens there is that it actually adds another party to negotiate with. So what we were ending up doing is negotiating with the conciliators and negotiating with the employers. Really exhausting thing to do and not very productive. So my question again here is, how do we stop being dragged into such bad faith negotiations, which we tried creatively to avoid all through, but clearly we failed. And how can we be more effective in conciliation? Because I've noticed that as well, the conciliators are very outdated in their approach, in that, you know, it's everybody's going to leave here unhappy. That's a deficit thinking that we should be leaving behind us and start thinking of win-win situations instead of, you know, how can we make you, because they don't care about the substance or the agreement. All they care about is to get an agreement so that it could be moved forward and they can go help some other employer or employee groups. So it's not but that's the box. Like, so how do we become more effective in this conciliation? So back to you.
Okay, great. More interactions, Aaron. Maybe that's the cue to